Get ready for a shocking video that will leave you speechless. Officer Reza's wife has had enough of her sneaky husband's antics, and she's not going down without a fight. The drama unfolds as she takes matters into her own hands and confronts her husband about his deceitful ways. Will Officer Reza be able to talk her way out of this one, or will his wife finally get the truth out of him? Watch till the end to find out. Join me as I dive into the drama and attempt to uncover the truth behind Officer Reza's wife's fight against her sneaky husband. What would you do if you discovered your partner was sneaking behind your back, weaving a web of lies that threatened to unravel everything you'd built together? In a world where trust is the fragile thread holding love together, one betrayal can tear it apart. For Amira, the wife of Officer Reza, that question wasn't just a thought. It was a reality that crept into her life like a shadow, darkening the edges of a marriage she'd once believed unbreakable. Amira and Reza lived in a modest brick house on the outskirts of Atlanta, a city that pulsed with the rhythm of ambition and history in 1998. Reza, a 35-year-old police officer with the Atlanta Police Department, was a man of quiet charisma, his broad shoulders and steady gaze earning him respect on the force and admiration at home. His laugh could fill a room, and his stories of late-night patrols kept Amira and their two children, 8-year-old Malik and 6-year-old Aisha, hanging on his every word. Amira, 32, was the heart of their home, a school counselor with a warm smile and a knack for seeing the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. They'd been married for 10 years, their love forged in the heat of shared dreams and the struggles of a black couple navigating a world that didn't always root for them. But beneath the surface of their seemingly solid marriage, cracks were forming. Reza's shifts grew longer, his phone buzzing at odd hours, and his eyes, once open books, now held secrets Amira couldn't read. She'd always trusted him, believed in the man who'd promised her forever under a starlit sky on their wedding night. But lately, his late returns home, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his uniform, and the way he avoided her gaze when she asked about his day, stirred a quiet dread in her heart. Amira wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but the signs were piling up, each one a pebble in the pile threatening to tip the balance of their life. It started with small things. Reza began missing family dinners, claiming extra patrols or paperwork at the precinct. Amira, juggling her own demanding job and the kids' schedules, didn't press him at first. She'd grown up in a family where trust was earned through patience, and she wanted to believe Reza's excuses. But then there were the late-night calls he'd take in the garage, his voice hushed and clipped, ending with a quick, "I gotta go," when she approached. Once, while doing laundry, she found a receipt in his pocket for a coffee shop in a part of town he had no reason to visit. A place far from his beat, with a date and time he'd said he was working late. The receipt was crumpled, as if he'd meant to throw it away, and it sat in her hand like a question she wasn't ready to ask. Amira's suspicions grew, a knot tightening in her chest. She tried to dismiss them, telling herself she was overreacting, that Reza was just stressed from the job. Policing wasn't easy, especially for a black officer in a city where tensions ran high. She'd seen the toll it took on him, the way his shoulders slumped after a tough shift, the stories of distrust he faced from both the community and his colleagues. But the more she tried to rationalize, the louder her instincts screamed. She started paying closer attention, noticing how his phone was always locked now, how he'd changed the subject when she asked about his new partner, Officer Daniels, a woman whose name came up too often in passing. One evening, as the kids played in the backyard, Amira sat at the kitchen table, her coffee growing cold. Reza was late again, his text claiming a last-minute call to a crime scene. She stared at the phone, her fingers hovering over the screen, tempted to call the precinct to check. She didn't. Instead, she thought of her mother's words, spoken years ago when Amira was a teenager. "Trust your gut, baby. It don't lie." Her gut was telling her something was wrong, and the weight of that truth was heavier than she'd expected. The kids' laughter drifted through the open window, a reminder of what was at stake. Malik, with his father's broad grin, and Aisha, with her mother's curious eyes, deserved a home built on love, not secrets. Amira's heart ached at the thought of their world fracturing. but she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She wasn't just Reza's wife. She was a woman who'd fought for everything she had, from her degree to her family, and she wasn't about to let that slip away without a fight. That night, when Reza finally came home, his uniform rumpled and his eyes tired, Amira met him at the door. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. He nodded, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. It was the first crack in the wall he'd built, and Amira knew she was about to step into a battle for the truth, one that would test her strength and redefine the love she'd held so dear. The kitchen was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant laughter of Malik and Aisha playing outside. Amira stood by the counter, her hands gripping the edge as Reza dropped his keys on the table, the clink echoing like a warning. His eyes, usually warm, were guarded, and the air between them felt thick with unspoken words. Amira had spent weeks wrestling with her suspicions, each clue, a late night, a locked phone, a receipt, building a case she didn't want to believe. But tonight, with the kids safe in the backyard and her heart pounding, she couldn't hold back any longer. "Reza, what's going on with you?" she asked, her voice low but firm, cutting through the silence. "You're gone all the time, and when you're here, you ain't really here. I'm not blind." He froze, his hand halfway to the fridge, then turned to face her. "Amira, it's just work," he said, his tone practiced, like a line he'd rehearsed. "You know how it is. Long hours, tough cases. I'm doing my best." "Your best?" She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Your best don't explain why you smell like perfume I don't wear, or why you're taking calls in the garage like you got something to hide. You think I don't notice, Reza? You think I don't feel it?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe, or defiance. "You're reading too much into things," he said, turning away to grab a glass from the cabinet. "I'm out there keeping this city safe, and you're in here playing detective." The word stung, sharp and dismissive, but Amira held her ground. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where you learned to stand tall or get walked over, and she wasn't about to let Reza dodge her now. "Don't do that," she said, her voice rising. "Don't make me feel like I'm crazy for asking questions. I found a receipt, Reza. Coffee shop on Peachtree, 2 weeks ago, when you said you were at the precinct. You want to tell me what that's about?" He paused, the glass in his hand catching the light. For a moment, she thought he'd come clean, but then he set it down, his shoulders slumping. "It was nothing. Just grabbed a coffee with a colleague. You know how it is, Amira. Cops stick together." "Colleague," she repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Officer Daniels, right? Funny how her name keeps coming up." She crossed her arms, her heart racing. "You telling me there's nothing more to it?" Reza's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his armor, a flash of panic that confirmed her worst fears. "Amira, you gotta trust me," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I ain't perfect, but I'm trying to do right by you and the kids." "Trust you?" She laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "Trust is earned, Reza, and you're spending it faster than I can keep up." She turned away, her hands trembling, and walked to the window, watching Malik chase Aisha through the grass. Their joy felt like a world apart from the storm brewing inside her. The seeds of Reza's behavior had been planted long before Amira noticed. He'd always been a charmer, the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything. Early in their marriage, it was part of what she loved, his ability to make her laugh, to smooth over rough days with a smile. But the job had changed him. 10 years on the force had hardened his edges. The constant pressure of being a black officer in a system that scrutinized his every move. He'd come home with stories of being second-guessed by white superiors, of community members who saw his badge as a betrayal. Amira had listened, held him, reminded him of who he was. But somewhere along the way, he'd started pulling away, building walls she couldn't climb. She'd first noticed the shift about 6 months ago when he started mentioning Officer Daniels, Cassandra, a younger officer with a reputation for being sharp and ambitious. At first, Amira thought nothing of it. Reza had always worked with women, and she'd never doubted his loyalty. But then came the late nights, the secretive calls, the way he'd smile at his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. She'd tried to talk herself out of it, chalking it up to stress, but the receipt in his pocket had been the final straw, a tangible piece of evidence she couldn't ignore. That night after the kids were in bed, Amira lay awake, the silence of the house pressing against her. Reza slept beside her, his breathing even, but she felt 1,000 miles away. She thought of her mother, who'd raised her alone after her father walked out, and the strength it had taken to keep going. Amira had sworn she'd never let a man break her the way her father had broken her mother. But here she was, staring at the ceiling, wondering if her marriage was a lie. The next morning, she called her best friend, Nia, a nurse with a no-nonsense attitude and a heart as big as Atlanta. They met at a diner near the school, the clatter of plates and the smell of coffee grounding Amira as she poured out her fears. Nia listened, her eyes narrowing as Amira recounted the receipt, the calls, the perfume. "Girl, you ain't crazy," Nia said, her voice firm. "You know what you gotta do. Either he comes clean, or you find out for yourself." Amira nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't ready to confront Reza head-on, not yet, but she wouldn't stay in the dark either. She started small, checking his phone bill online, noting the numbers he called most often. One stood out, a number he'd texted late at night, dozens of times over the past month. Her heart sank, but she saved it, determined to learn the truth. Over the next few weeks, Amira became a quiet investigator, her love for Reza warring with her need to know. She noticed how he'd linger at the precinct after his shift, claiming paperwork, and how his stories about his day grew vaguer. One night, she drove to the coffee shop on Peachtree, her hands gripping the wheel as she scanned the parking lot for his car. It wasn't there, but the act of looking felt like a betrayal of the trust she'd once held so dear. The tension in their home grew, a silent storm that even the kids felt. Malik asked why Daddy was always gone, and Aisha clung to Amira more than usual, her small hands seeking reassurance. Amira's heart broke for them, but it also steeled her. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the family they'd built, for the love she still believed in, even if it was buried under layers of doubt. The Atlanta summer of 1998 draped the city in a haze of heat, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and exhaust. Amira moved through her days like a woman carrying a secret too heavy to share, her heart a battleground of love and suspicion. Each morning she woke to the sound of Reza's alarm, his footsteps heavy as he prepared for another shift, and each night she lay beside him, the distance between them wider than the bed they shared. Her investigation into his behavior had become a quiet obsession, a puzzle she pieced together with every late-night text, every vague excuse, every trace of that unfamiliar perfume lingering on his uniform. Amira's days at the school were a refuge, her work with students grounding her in a purpose that felt unshakable. She counseled teenagers through their own dramas, broken friendships, family struggles, dreams deferred. Her voice steady even as her own world trembled. But the kids noticed her distraction, the way her smile didn't always reach her eyes. One afternoon, a 16-year-old named Kayla, sharp and perceptive, lingered after a session. "Miss Amira, you okay?" she asked, her braids swinging as she tilted her head. "You look like you carrying something heavy." Amira forced a smile, her hand resting on Kayla's shoulder. "Just life, baby," she said. "We all got our burdens." But Kayla's words stayed with her, a reminder that her pain was visible, even if she tried to hide it. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, torn between trust and truth. She needed answers, not just for herself, but for Malik and Aisha, whose innocent questions about their father's absence cut deeper each day. Her search grew bolder. One evening, while Reza was at the precinct, Amira borrowed Nia's car and drove to a bar near the station, a place where cops often gathered after shifts. She'd overheard Reza mention it once, his tone casual, but his eyes evasive. She sat in the parking lot, her heart pounding as she watched officers spill out, their laughter loud in the humid night. Then she saw him, Reza, standing close to a woman with long braids and a confident stride, Officer Cassandra Daniels. They leaned against his car, their heads bent together, her hand brushing his arm in a way that was too familiar, too intimate. Amira's breath caught, her hands gripping the steering wheel as the world tilted. She didn't confront him then. Instead, she drove home, her mind racing, her heart a mix of fury and grief. The image of Reza and Cassandra burned into her, a betrayal she couldn't unsee. She spent the night on the couch, unable to face the bed they shared, her thoughts spiraling. Had it been going on for months? Years? Was this why he'd pulled away? Why his love felt like a memory? She thought of their wedding day, the way he'd looked at her like she was his whole world, and the contrast to now was a knife in her chest. The next day, Amira dug deeper. She called the number from Reza's phone bill, the one he'd texted late at night. A woman answered, her voice smooth and professional. "This is Cassandra," she said, and Amira's heart sank. She hung up without speaking, her hands trembling. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to fuel her resolve. She started tracking Reza's patterns, noting when he left, when he returned, and where he claimed to be. She found another receipt, this time for a motel in Decatur, tucked in the pocket of his gym bag. The date matched a night he'd said he was working overtime, and the room was paid for in cash. A detail that felt like a confession. Amira confided in Nia again, this time over coffee at her apartment, the kids at a sleepover with their cousins. Nia listened, her eyes narrowing as Amira laid out the evidence, receipts, texts, the bar. "You got enough to know he's lying," Nia said, her voice firm. "But you gotta decide what you're gonna do with it. You confront him, you gotta be ready for whatever comes next." "I know," Amira said, her voice breaking. "But I can't keep living like this, Nia. I'm losing myself trying to hold on to him." She thought of Malik and Aisha, of the family they'd built, and the fear of losing it was almost as strong as the pain of Reza's betrayal. Almost. She began preparing, gathering her strength like a soldier before battle. She saved copies of the receipts, screenshots of the phone bill, even a photo she'd taken from her car that night at the bar. She didn't want to believe Reza was cheating, but the evidence was a tide she couldn't hold back. She spoke to a lawyer friend discreetly, asking about her options if things went south. The conversation left her hollow. The idea of divorce a weight she wasn't ready to carry. But she needed to be ready, for her kids, for herself. At home, the tension was palpable. Reza sensed the change in her, the way her eyes followed him, the way her questions had an edge. He grew quieter, his excuses flimsier, and Amira wondered if he knew she was closing in. One night as they sat at the dinner table, Malik asked, "Daddy, why you always so tired?" Reza's smile was strained, and Amira's heart ached for the innocence in her son's voice, for the family they might lose. She knew the confrontation was coming, a storm gathering on the horizon. She wasn't sure what she'd find when she faced Reza, denial, confession, or something worse. But she was done hiding from the truth. Amira had always been a fighter, from the days she'd worked 2 jobs to pay for college to the nights she'd rocked her babies through fevers and fears. She'd fight for her marriage, for her family, for the woman she was. And if Reza couldn't meet her halfway, she'd fight for herself too. As the summer days stretched on, Amira felt the weight of her resolve, a fire kindling in her chest. She wasn't just Reza's wife anymore. She was Amira, a woman ready to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The Atlanta sky was heavy with clouds in late August of 1998, mirroring the storm brewing in Amira's heart. She moved through her days with a quiet resolve, her suspicions about Reza no longer just whispers but a roaring truth she couldn't ignore. The receipts, the late-night texts, the image of him with Cassandra at the bar, they were pieces of a puzzle that formed a picture of betrayal. Amira, at 32, had always prided herself on her strength, but this was a battle she hadn't prepared for, one that threatened the foundation of her family and the love she'd held sacred for 10 years. She'd spent weeks gathering evidence, each discovery a wound that deepened her resolve. The motel receipt from Decatur haunted her, its date and cash payment a silent accusation. She'd driven by the place once, a rundown building off a busy road, its neon sign flickering like a bad omen. She imagined Reza there, with Cassandra, and the thought made her stomach churn. But imagining wasn't enough. She needed to know, to hear it from him, to see if the man she'd married was still there behind the lies. Amira planned the confrontation carefully, waiting for a night when the kids were at Nia's house, giving her the space to face Reza without their wide eyes watching. She chose a Friday, knowing he'd be home after a long shift, his defenses worn thin. The house was quiet when he walked in, the air thick with the scent of the jasmine candle she'd lit to steady her nerves. Reza dropped his keys on the counter, his uniform rumpled, his face etched with exhaustion. "Long day," he muttered, heading for the fridge. "Sit down, Reza," Amira said, her voice calm but unyielding, cutting through the hum of the house. He froze, his hand on the fridge door, then turned to face her. His eyes, usually so steady, flickered with unease. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone cautious as he sat at the kitchen table. Amira stood across from him, her hand steady despite the storm in her chest. She'd laid out the evidence on the table, a folder with the receipts, the phone bill, the photo from the bar. It wasn't an accusation yet, just a question, but the weight of it filled the room. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said, her voice low but firm. "No more excuses, no more it's just work. I found the receipt from Peachtree, the one from the motel in Decatur. I saw you with Cassandra at the bar, and I know you've been calling her late at night, so tell me, Reza, what's going on?" His face paled, his hands clenching into fists on the table. For a moment he said nothing, his eyes darting to the folder, then back to her. "Amira, you're blowing this out of proportion," he started, but his voice lacked conviction. "Cassandra's just a friend, a colleague. We work together, that's all." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice rising, the calm breaking like glass. "I'm not some fool you can talk circles around. I've been holding this family together while you're out there acting like I don't exist. You owe me the truth, Reza. For me, for Malik, for Aisha. Are you sleeping with her?" The question hung in the air, sharp and heavy, a blade poised to cut through 10 years of promises. Reza's shoulders slumped, his eyes dropping to the table. The silence was an answer, but Amira needed the words. "Say it," she demanded, her voice trembling now, tears burning behind her eyes. "Say it, Reza." He looked up, his face a mask of guilt and regret. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Cassandra, it started as nothing, just talking. She gets the job, you know, the pressure, the way it wears you down. One thing led to another and, yeah, it happened, a few times. I'm sorry, Amira." The confession hit like a tidal wave, knocking the air from her lungs. She'd braced for it, prepared for the worst, but hearing it, knowing the man she'd loved had betrayed her, felt like losing a piece of herself. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "How long?" she asked, her voice raw. "How long you been lying to me?" 6 months, he admitted, his head bowed. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you, Amira. I love the kids. I got lost." "Lost?" She laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet kitchen. "You didn't get lost, Reza. You chose this. You chose to break us." She gestured to the folder, the evidence of his betrayal. "I trusted you. I fought for you, for us, every day. And you threw it away for what? A fling?" "It's not a fling," he said, then stopped, his eyes widening as he realized his mistake. "I mean, it's not like that. I care about her, but I love you. I want to fix this." Amira's heart twisted, a mix of rage and sorrow. She wanted to scream, to throw the folder at him, to demand how he could care about someone else when he had her, when he had their children. But she held herself together, her strength a shield she'd forged through years of love and sacrifice. "You don't get to decide what's fixable," she said, her voice steady now. "Not after this. I need time, Reza. And you need to figure out what you're gonna do, 'cause I ain't living like this." She turned away, her hands trembling as she walked to the living room, leaving him at the table with his guilt. The jasmine candle flickered, its light casting shadows on the walls, and Amira felt the weight of her world shifting. She didn't know if their marriage could survive this, but she knew she wouldn't let it define her. She was more than Reza's wife. She was Amira, a mother, a fighter, a woman who'd face this storm and come out stronger. That night, she slept in the guest room, the silence deafening. Reza didn't follow her, and she was grateful for the space, though it felt like a chasm. She thought of Malik and Aisha asleep at Nia's, and her heart ached for the future they'd face. She thought of her mother, who'd rebuilt her life after betrayal, and found a spark of hope in that memory. The road ahead was uncertain, but Amira was ready to fight, not just for her family, but for herself. The days following Reza's confession stretched like a taut wire, each moment vibrating with the tension of a marriage on the brink. Amira woke each morning to a house that felt both familiar and foreign, the walls echoing with memories of laughter now overshadowed by betrayal. At 32, she'd built a life with Reza that was supposed to be unbreakable, a home for their 2 children, 8-year-old Malik and 6-year-old Aisha, a partnership rooted in love and shared dreams. But his admission of an affair with Cassandra, spanning 6 months, had shattered that foundation, leaving Amira to navigate the rubble. She kept her routine steady for the kids' sake, rising early to pack lunches and braid Aisha's hair, her hands moving with a mother's instinct even as her heart ached. Malik's questions about Reza's absence grew sharper, his young eyes searching hers for answers she couldn't give. "Is Daddy mad at us?" he asked one morning, his spoon hovering over his cereal. Amira's throat tightened, but she forced a smile. "No, baby," she said, her voice soft. "Daddy's just got a lot on his mind. We're gonna be okay." The lie tasted bitter, but she'd protect them as long as she could. Reza, too, was a ghost in their home. He slept on the couch, his presence a quiet apology that did little to bridge the chasm between them. He tried to talk, leaving notes on the counter. "I'm sorry, Amira. Let's work this out." But she wasn't ready. His words felt hollow, overshadowed by the image of him with Cassandra, the motel receipt, the late-night texts. Amira needed space to process, to decide what she deserved, not just what he wanted to give. She leaned on Nia, her best friend, whose fierce loyalty was a lifeline. Over coffee at Nia's apartment, Amira poured out her pain, her voice raw. "I don't know who I am without him," she admitted, her hands wrapped around a mug. 10 years, Nia. I gave him everything, and he threw it away." Nia's eyes were steady, her voice firm. "You're still you, Amira. You're a mother, a counselor, a woman who's been holding it down. He don't define you. You gotta decide what you want. For you, not just for him or the kids." Nia's words were a spark, igniting something in Amira that had been buried under the weight of betrayal, a determination to reclaim herself. She started small, carving out moments for reflection. She journaled late at night, her pen scratching out the anger, the hurt, the love she still felt despite it all. She went back to church, something she'd let slide in the chaos of family life. The familiar hymns at Mount Zion Baptist, where she'd grown up, wrapped around her like a warm blanket, and the pastor's words about forgiveness and strength stirred a resolve she hadn't felt in months. She wasn't ready to forgive Reza, but she was ready to fight for her own peace. At work, Amira threw herself into her role as a school counselor, finding solace in helping her students navigate their own struggles. Kayla, the perceptive 16-year-old, noticed the change in her, the way her eyes carried a new fire. "You look stronger, Miss Amira," Kayla said one day, her smile shy. "Like you're ready for anything." Amira hugged her, the words a reminder that her strength was visible, even in her pain. But the question of her marriage loomed large. Reza was trying, cutting back on late shifts, leaving his phone unlocked, even offering to go to counseling. "I ended it with Cassandra," he told her one evening, his voice earnest as they stood in the backyard, the kids asleep inside. "I messed up, Amira, but I want us. I'll do whatever it takes." His eyes were wet, his hands outstretched, but Amira's heart was guarded. "I hear you," she said, her voice steady but distant. "But words ain't enough. You broke something in me, Reza, and I don't know if it can be fixed." She saw the pain in his face, but she couldn't soften, not yet. She needed to know if his change was real, if their love could survive the scars. Amira sought guidance from her mother, Ruth, who'd raised her alone after her own marriage crumbled. Over tea at Ruth's small house, Amira shared everything: the affair, the confrontation, the uncertainty. Ruth listened, her hands steady despite her 60 years, her eyes carrying the wisdom of a survivor. "Love ain't enough on its own," Ruth said, her voice soft but firm. "It takes trust, and trust takes work. You gotta decide if he's worth that work, and if you're worth it to yourself." Those words became Amira's mantra. She started couples counseling with Reza, a tense hour each week where they laid bare their hurts and hopes. Reza admitted the affair had been an escape, a way to cope with the pressures of his job and the weight of being a black officer in a system that often felt rigged. Amira shared her pain, the betrayal that had shaken her sense of self. The sessions were raw, sometimes angry, but they were a start, a fragile bridge between them. At home, Amira focused on the kids, creating new traditions to keep them grounded. A Saturday movie night, a Sunday baking session with Aisha's favorite cookies. Their laughter was a balm, a reminder of what she was fighting for. But she was also fighting for herself, rediscovering the woman who'd once dreamed of changing lives, who'd earned her degree against the odds, who'd loved fiercely even when it hurt. As autumn approached, Amira felt a shift. The pain was still there, but it was no longer the only thing defining her. She was stronger, clearer, a woman reclaiming her power. She didn't know if her marriage would survive, but she knew she would, because Amira was a fighter, and this fight was for her soul. The Atlanta autumn of 1998 painted the city in hues of gold and crimson, a quiet promise of change that Amira felt in her bones. At 32, she stood at a crossroads, her marriage to Reza tested by his 6-month affair with Cassandra, a betrayal that had shaken the foundation of their 10-year union. Yet, in the months since the confrontation, Amira had found a strength she hadn't known she possessed, a resilience forged in the fire of pain, love, and the fierce determination to protect her children, 8-year-old Malik and 6-year-old Aisha, and herself. The couple's counseling sessions were a battlefield of raw emotion, each one peeling back layers of hurt and hope. Reza, now 35, spoke of his regrets with a vulnerability Amira hadn't seen in years. He admitted the affair had been a coward's escape, a way to numb the weight of his job as a black police officer in a city where trust was a rare commodity. "I lost sight of you," he told her in one session, his voice thick with tears. "I lost sight of us. But I'm here now, Amira, and I'll keep showing up." Amira listened, her heart torn between the love she still felt and the trust that lay in pieces. She shared her own truth, the way his betrayal had made her question her worth, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, the fear that their family would never be whole again. The counselor, a woman named Dr. Ellis with a calm presence and sharp insight, guided them through the chaos, urging them to rebuild not just their marriage, but themselves. "Trust isn't given," Dr. Ellis said. "It's built, brick by brick, through honesty and time." Outside the sessions, Amira focused on her own healing. She joined a women's group at Mount Zion Baptist, where she found solace in the stories of others who'd faced betrayal and emerged stronger. One woman, Miss Clara, a 62-year-old widow, shared her own tale of surviving a cheating husband decades ago. "You don't stay for him," Miss Clara said, her eyes kind but firm. "You stay for you, if that's what you choose. But you gotta know your worth, child." Amira nodded, her heart steadying. She was beginning to see herself not just as Reza's wife, but as Amira, a woman, a mother, a fighter. At home, she poured her energy into Malik and Aisha, creating moments of joy to shield them from the storm. They built forts in the living room, baked peach cobbler on Sundays, and read bedtime stories that filled the house with laughter. Malik, perceptive beyond his years, asked one night, "Are you and Daddy gonna be okay?" Amira hugged him close, her voice steady. "We're working on it, baby, but no matter what, I got you and Aisha, always." Her words were a vow, one she kept with every fiber of her being. Reza, too, was trying. He transferred to a different precinct, away from Cassandra, and made a point of being home for dinner, his phone left unlocked on the counter as a gesture of transparency. He took the kids to the park, his laughter mingling with theirs, and Amira saw glimpses of the man she'd fallen in love with. But trust was a slow climb, and some nights, when he reached for her, she pulled away, the memory of his betrayal still sharp. One evening, As the leaves fell outside their brick house, Amira sat down with Reza after the kids were asleep. The jasmine candle flickered on the table. It sent a reminder of the night she'd confronted him. "I'm trying," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "But I need you to know this ain't easy. Every time I look at you, I see her too. I need time, and I need you to keep proving you're worth it." Reza nodded, his eyes wet. "I know I hurt you, Amira. I'll spend the rest of my life making it right, if you let me." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him hold it, the warmth of his touch a fragile bridge between them. By winter, their marriage was a work in progress, a house being rebuilt from the ashes. They celebrated Christmas as a family, the kids' excitement filling the gaps where words failed. Amira watched Reza help Aisha hang ornaments, his smile genuine, and felt a spark of hope. It wasn't the same love they'd had before. It was scarred, tested, but maybe stronger for it. She didn't know if they'd make it, but she knew she was strong enough to face whatever came. Amira also found purpose in her work, starting a support group at the school for students dealing with family challenges. She shared pieces of her story, carefully, letting them know they weren't alone. Kayla, her perceptive student, joined the group, her own struggles with a fractured home finding a mirror in Amira's strength. "You make me believe I can get through this," Kayla said, her eyes bright. Amira hugged her, knowing that helping others was healing her too. The story of Amira and Reza wasn't a neat resolution, but a journey of resilience and redemption. Trust, once broken, was a fragile thing to rebuild. But Amira learned that communication, raw, honest, painful, was the cornerstone. She fought not just for her marriage, but for herself, proving that love could survive if both hearts were willing to work. For Malik and Aisha, for the woman she was becoming, Amira stood tall, a beacon of strength in a world that tested it. What would you do if trust was broken in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how you faced challenges in your relationships. For more stories of love, betrayal, and redemption, check out our video on overcoming family struggles. Link in the description. Subscribe and hit the bell to never miss a story that moves the heart.